Sarah, thank you so much for taking time out for me. I would love to start from 2014 Commonwealth Games. And it's a special occasion. Tell me everything about the moment all the way to winning the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow.
So I think Glasgow was emotional for a number of reasons. Yeah, certainly it's one of the highlights of my competition career. Glasgow was my last ever competitive event as an athlete or a judo player. And it certainly was one extra step to what I was maybe going to do. I thought London would have probably been my last competitive event, but I did compete a few more times. For a number of reasons, there's some really big memories from Glasgow. I think competing there was pressure, but pressure from other people much more than it was for me. I think my whole judo career, pressure was from myself, or certainly the latter part of my career, it was all about me, Sarah Clark. Look how you're performing, pressure on yourself. But I think going into Glasgow, the pressure came from the judo club, from wanting to do a good job, from wanting to have that platform, that gold medal, that Scotland home games, to allow me to share it with everybody that had been part of my journey over the last 20 plus years, even more as an athlete, coming through as a junior and a senior. And I knew that a lot of the people from the judo club were going to the competition, especially my parents, kids in the club, some friends and family. And there's one story that pops out. I made my way through to the finals, and then between the start of the day, between the preliminaries and the final, there's about a 2-hour block, and you can do whatever you want. You can sleep, you can see family, you can chill out, but pretty much for me, it was always the same. I'd stay within the sort of the warm-up room. I'd have a bite to eat, and then I'd usually lie down and listen to a bit of music. But I liked to be in tune with what was happening, so I never completely zoned out. I never quite trusted people to wake me up and tell me that you've got so long left. I always wanted to know what was going on, what time's it starting, what time is it now. So I got warmed up, got ready to go, and you stand in a tunnel, and there was a lighter category on before me, and then 63s are coming up, the final of 63 kilos, my category. And I'm standing in the tunnel, and it's this tunnel, you can see the lights in the SECC, and you can hear the DJ playing, and it was a real family atmosphere, and there's a couple of screens either side of me, and it's the stadium, you're panning around the stadium, and it stops on this a family of 4, and there's 2 adults, 2 kids from the judo club. And I was like, wow, sort of big breath, like, this is real. This isn't just for me, this is like for all of these people here. And that was quite a surreal moment, and it made me calm down, put my head into the right space, and you walk out, you're introduced as you are, and you sort of zone out. And most of, from that moment on, I can't really remember the next part. You go up onto the mat, you bow, you get introduced, and then you're in the contest. And I managed to unlock the girl in the final. So she was a tough, strong girl from Cameroon. I'd never competed against her before. So it was really the unknown, a very physically strong athlete. And she was in the final of the Commonwealth Games as well. Yep, unlock the girl, crowd go crazy. And I can remember, I don't really remember, I could feel it was just a calmness, like relief that I'd done this, that everybody could see what was happening. Everyone was like giving me a wee clap. I just put my hand on the girl's head. So she's lying on the ground, she'd lost, I'd won. And I was like, are you okay? Are you all right? And didn't jump up and down like how you imagine, how this person's won. You imagine sport's going to have you jumping around the mat. But I guess that goes back to judo as well. It's a bit about discipline, it's respect and all these things. And at the end of the day, you're on the mat, and it is a fight. It's a physical fight. And then at the end, you bow, you shake hands. Thank you very much for the honour or the pleasure of having a fight. And then I met with the girl after, and we had dinner, and we talked. But I came off that, and you have media, and media was quite big because it was a home games. And Billy was there, and we walked off, and he had to walk off because he was coaching another athlete in the next weight category, a friend of mine, Sally. And you get interviewed, and then it was just then that I walked out, and somebody said, did you hear? And I was like, what? And they said Billy's dad died during the break between the morning session and the afternoon session. Now, he had been really ill in the build-up, and we'd stayed in Glasgow, but we travelled back to Edinburgh every few days to see him. But you don't expect that. And certainly Billy came out, and he was still doing his job as a coach. He was still there coaching and doing what he's always done. And part of it was that his brother called and said, Billy, you should be home, you should be here, your dad's died. And his mum jumped on the phone, and Margaret was the boss, and Margaret said, no, Billy, you stay where you are, your dad wanted you to do this is what you do, and you can't leave the athletes like this. So yeah, that was the Commonwealth Games. So for many reasons, it was a big memory. And then we went on and had a really successful Commonwealth Games for club players as well as for the whole Scottish team. It was the biggest medal haul from one sport. I mean, it really made the Games special for a number of people. And that was the last time that I competitively stepped onto a judo mat to fight another person, for want of a better word.
It's fascinating on so many different levels. At the level of sacrifice, I cannot even comprehend. So hats off to Billy for putting everything aside to make sure that nothing comes in between your day to shine and not letting your personal problems project into the performance and the task at hand. Tell me more about how you reconciled with this news post winning. One hand, the entire world is celebrating without knowing what's brewing under the hood. So how did you manage the two together? Because it's not easy.
It was a difficult period. We were in day 2 of the judo event. So my day was day 2. So Billy had coached on day 1. Day 2, he had 3 athletes that he coached personally, my day. And then because it was such a big event for home games, they wanted you on to the media, the one show. There was a few things that happened. But Billy went back through with his sister. So his 2 sisters were there watching me. So he went back through to the family home and he stayed overnight with the family. But the next day he had athletes competing on day 3. So they spent the time at home overnight. I think there was a sense of calmness. And then he came back through the next day for the Commonwealth Games, day 3 for the judo event. And in some way, you know, Pat was very involved with Billy's life as a judo player. So Pat introduced Billy to judo. He was a brown belt in the army and he was Billy's biggest supporter. So in one sense, this was what they talked about. This is what the shared passion was. And Pat drove a family to the Olympic Games when he competed in Spain. The family went and drove all the way to Barcelona. Yeah, it was difficult, but we had another sort of 7 days of the Commonwealth Games. So there was some really good things that came out of it. There was some people in the village that worked in partnership with Commonwealth Games that actually invited Billy and his family and all of us to some events so we could take Margaret along and his sisters and the family. Yeah, and we talked through it and we got through it and it was tough. It was tough times, but Billy took I don't know what's the word. Billy took pride in that Pat was part of the whole journey that had made him and helped to create what Billy was as a coach and a motivator and a psychologist. So yeah, it was interesting times. And then we started on the journey again with the next players and the next crop of players and the club and the parties at the club and the showcasing what judo's all about and talking about all the good things.
Tell me more about the extended journey. Journey never ends, but what was it like to transition from competing professionally then to be teaching and mentoring the next wave of young players?
I think for me, as the Commonwealth Games came and came and went, I'd already started to make that transition. So post London, I'd really start to put a lot of effort into looking after young people and not necessarily so much for me into looking after the next crop of Olympic athletes. I think I started to look after the support. The club had been running and ticking over and really was looked after when we were still competing. But now we could really step back in and make a difference in other places and bring more to the party in terms of how can we get more people involved? How can we really showcase what we do? How can we mentor people about the resilience and the leadership skills and all the skills that you learn being part of a team? And with that, we wanted to make sure that people had an opportunity when they came to Edinburgh Judo to have a lifelong love of sport and judo, to go down the route of competing internationally if they wanted to, and to have an extended family that they could always go to the judo club and they always felt they had somewhere that they belonged. And for us, I think that's been one of the biggest things, is that there's been a sense of belonging in the judo club. And it doesn't matter what your background, where you come from, how it's going, how you're feeling on that day, that you can come to Edinburgh Judo and you can feel part of something. And we've tried exceptionally hard to create that. And I think we're in a good place now. There's lots of more things we can do to make that better. It's less about the judo now. Of course, we want to give off a lot of good coaching about the skills of judo, but actually it's about having a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. So we work with schools, we work with other clubs, we work in partnership with other organisations. And I did a lot of work with James Kelly Homes Trust And that was, as most of us know, Dame Kelly Holmes. She was a double Olympian, double gold medalist in Athens. And Kelly set up an organisation that worked with young people having faced disadvantage. And I learned a lot from Kelly and the organisation. And we ran a lot of programmes in Scotland, in and out of the Judo Club and Action for Children, and lots of organisations that allowed myself as an athlete to give back to young people and actually talk about life as an athlete and life that some of these young people were part of or part of. Very similar trajectories. There's ups and downs, there's bumps in the road. You're going to have more lows than highs, possibly, but we help them navigate through life and look how to go back into work, education, training, and to really feel part of something. And do you know what? It all came back to ultimately that people wanted to be heard and people wanted to feel part of something. And if they felt that they could give back, then that fulfilled that person as well. So I've learned a lot from working with Dame Kelly Holmes and the organisation, and we've taken a lot of that forward into the work that we do today in Edinburgh.
It's really important for young people to learn that there is more than winning, and more importantly, how to cope up with losing. Tell me more about your evolution from being competitive to stepping back roles. Was it an easy transition?
That's a great question. I like to be organised. I like to write things down. Would probably be told off because I'm a bit controlling and like to know what's happening when. People that I'm working with now within Edinburgh Judo will probably say, just have a chill and calm down and it'll get done. And I'm like, wow, let's do it now, or let's do it yesterday. It's not done. Part of the transition was quite natural. I was a natural organizer. My parents would, or certainly my mum would tell you that since I was 5 years old, I just wanted to organize everybody and put everybody in the right place. So that was a natural transition. But also I was very aware that ultimately I was going to come to the end of my judo career, whether it was in 2005, 2006, 2012 or 14. So I was already developing these life skills. So I was working with the organisation I spoke about. Prior to that, I was working with Women in Scotland Foundation. And these were all things that developed me. So the people that I worked with in these organisations and these charities were giving me the skills to then go on and succeed with the work that we do now. So I think it was a natural progression. I think not everybody has that. And I think we could and should do more as a body. So whether it's people would maybe say UK sports job or the organisation's job, but I think we should be able to do more to develop young people, or not young people, develop older athletes transitioning out of sport so that they really have a sense of purpose once they move away from sport. And we talked earlier about winning. Not winning's the ultimate goal, but actually whether you win or lose doesn't really matter. It's the journey. And maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I think winning then allows you to have the platform to do other things, but also if you understand that the journey's been really important and how you've gone along in that journey, and you can really say, actually, this is where I really learned, this is why it happened, this is not why it happened. You can take that into any part of your life, but you need to get taught that. That's not just something that happens naturally. So we maybe need to look at programs on how we teach people these skills, how we teach people that this is a natural part of life, and how we then bolt on extra learning opportunities, whether it's going back to school, whether it's going into work experience as an older athlete, whether it's learning how to speak in front of a group of people. Like as a child, I was such a shy child. Like I would never want to sit and talk. I'd rather, even now as an adult, sit and listen and not talk, which is bizarre because I've had to really push out of my comfort zone to stand up in front of people or to do one-to-one. I hate these video calls and conferences because it's almost, you're talking to a screen. I'm much better in person. So I've had to push out of my comfort zone. It's learning how do you do that? How do you practice it? Having the platform to get it wrong and then try and get it right.
Tell me more about the work that you're doing to promote judo, how the entire ecosystem growing, and more importantly, what are you doing on the business side to make it a bit more commercial so that more and more people can get associated with it? And tell me more about your work with Edinburgh Judo.
So we work and have done for a long time with local schools, so certainly in Edinburgh, across all different domains in state, private, special education schools. And first and foremost, and we've started to work a lot with rugby now as well for a crossover of sports. But ultimately, the idea is to showcase judo, showcase what judo can do for young people. And I'm a big believer that the skills that we teach young judo players are foundational, fundamental movement skills. So the way you bounce, hop, jump, skip, run, how you fall. I think these are skills for life. So this is something that we're really trying to look at. How do we get this into every school? How can this be a block that every child learns some of these skills? Because as much as anything, it keeps you safe and it keeps you moving. We're trying to make judo more accessible. So we're also trying to work at developing the non-for-profit side as well. So as well as we've got Edinburgh Judo and the schools and the event side, we're trying to work with the non-for-profit so that we can really get judo to everybody, so that everybody can have a chance to experience judo, but not just bring it as judo, bring it as development skills, so developing leadership skills, developing these mentorship skills, developing the soft skills that we've started to band about now. How do you get on in life? Soft skills. But actually, sport and judo have a lot of these things. We want to, within Edinburgh Judo, we want to develop the coaches so that they can coach children's judo, and also they get the skills to start to teach more elite judo skills, so that if people want to go off and compete internationally, they can. We've got much more involved with the refereeing and the volunteering side, so that we have people that have got an avenue within judo. And building the business of Edinburgh Judo with all the pockets, we're going to need skills. We're going to need, and we've got communications. We have our social media platforms. We're going to need to delve much more into the data side, looking at how do we keep young people in the sport? How do we build programs for women and girls? How do we build self-defense programs? All of these programs that link, ultimately, Gagan, give a sense of community and a sense of belonging and a lifelong love of sport and judo.
Absolutely. And there is no better way than giving back to the sport that you love, is being in service to the same sport and helping it extend and make it more accessible to people who might not necessarily have the means or even the knowledge to be able to experience it firsthand. So phenomenal work on Edinburgh Judo. Tell me more about the things that you've learned being the highest ranked professional in judo. How do you translate the learnings from that in a world of business? Tell me more about what got you into a business school.
That's an amazing question, and I'm not really 100% sure, because it was one of the hardest things. Actually, business school was one of the most difficult things that I've ever been part of. Certainly, it's an opposite of judo. It's a mental rather than physical. Having been out of education for 20 years, and not being in a business side of life was such a huge transition. If we take it really back, I met up with some people that were involved in business and oil and gas and different avenues. And one of the biggest things was that they talked about their judo and their career. They talked about their judo and their foundation in judo, but how that had led them to be successful in business. And they attributed many of their successes in business to judo. So I guess it was this transition, meeting more people, talking about the crossover of the world of business and the world of sport. Then I started to read a bit more about culture and role models. And actually, the more that I read, the more that I could see the transfer and the crossover. So that led me to start to look into some sort of executive business school. And it was interesting because the modules within the study, some of the modules I absolutely felt that they were made for me. When you talk about the leadership, and it was like, wow, I'm coming home. And then the other ones couldn't be further off the other end, such as microeconomics and accountancy. It was literally like my brain was getting scrambled in a blender. And then I got some great support, and we spoke at the beginning about how we were in a group together and just having such different people from different backgrounds in one group and then across the whole school coming together. I realized that there was so much more that my brain hadn't really been exposed to. And from there, started to make inroads, and then we could work more with Edinburgh Judo and developing, expanding and moving things along. But yeah, in terms of the business schools side of things, it was just another level. It was crazy.
I find it really fascinating yet interesting to see somebody like of your pedigree and background finding business school to be challenging. I would expect it like business school, personally from my point of view, coming from professional background and from traditional education. I was also thinking that business school is going to be an easy ride, but it's not. And it's all the more reassuring because business school, for me, it was a special education, not purely because of the academic rigor that was part of it, but for me, the most fascinating part of that experience was meeting people like yourself. In our study group, we had people who were working in oil and gas, who were working in, let's say, luxury retail, FMCG, sports background like yourself, IT, and technology in my case. It's really interesting to see how different people think, and more importantly, how different people respond to pressure. And that is the beauty of that entire experience, right? I mean, you are given a constrained timeline, and then you're given a goal, and you have to self-organize, find out the right way of working, and then come up to a logical conclusion. Answers are never right and they're never wrong.
Yeah.
But it's actually how you first diverge and then converge into a common understanding is actually the beauty of that experience. So what I took away from business school was exactly that. People from different backgrounds are going to come to solve a certain situation. And it's how you organize and get behind a goal and deliver the outcome is what the entire education was.
Wasn't it interesting how when you're essentially thrown together in a group of 6 or 7 people, how before you can even get to that goal, we had to sit down and navigate each other, didn't we? We had to talk through, how do you work? How do I work? What's your time constraints? Because everybody had something else and different things going on outside of that school journey as well. So it wasn't just about being in the classroom, being in the study room till midnight every night. It was about, what can you do tonight? I can maybe do tomorrow. How do we bring it together? How do we get to the end? So even just that relationship thing was really important at the start, wasn't it? You could had to connect from the start, didn't you?
Absolutely. And I think this is where the biggest education lies. It's all about navigating things in uncertainty and ambiguity. No outcome is clearly defined. And that's what I find it rather different because, especially, let's say, if we were to take your example, sports is a very defined outcome. You have very defined goals and you are working on a very steady cadence at the highest possible level. Whereas in business or in life in general, nothing is certain, right? I mean, you are thrown oddballs every now and then. And in your
Absolutely.
example, the story that you shared with Billy is actually mitigating those things to make sure that the outcome that you're trying to strive for is not impacted, but at the same time, doing everything you can to manage those. So I think that is what is wisdom in a way, how you respond to a situation, right? There's a famous quote, right? Life is 1% what happens to you and 99% how you respond to it.
Absolutely. And it's experience, isn't it, as well? Like everyone says, oh, the most experience, but you gather experience, then you react, and then maybe you have to react a different way. I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. I was thinking about how you navigate life, and as you get more experience or as you get older, you have to be ready to be hit in different ways, isn't it? And then how do you keep your head in the game? We talked about it with my psychologist, it's about cutting out the noise. So we did a lot of work around what's really important, but getting rid of the noise. And the noise wasn't a physical noise. It was all these other things that were being thrown at you. Something happens in somebody's life, something happens in your family. How can you acknowledge that and accept it? But how can you get on and still focus on what you're doing? And that's sport, that's life, that's business. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that today.
In the same spirit, let's talk about failure. Failure, oftentimes the not, is not discussed as much as it should be. And in my impression, failure is much more important because it teaches you more than the success. Tell me more about the experience of and how do you respond to it?
I think, losing, nobody likes to lose, do they? It's not a very nice thing, or it certainly gets you to jolt and say, okay, what's next? How do we go about this? Let me use the Olympic Games, for example. I went into the Beijing Olympic Games, and often hindsight will tell you that I felt great and everything went perfect. And you can then use your hindsight bias to say that was a wonderful moment. But actually, in the lead up to the Olympic Games in Beijing in 2008, I think I probably felt one of the best I'd ever felt. My preparation was really good. Physically, I was in a good place, and mentally, I was in a good place. And I was against a girl called Claudia Heil from Austria at 63 kilos. Now, I'd fought Claudia in the Athens Olympic Games 4 years earlier, first contest as well. And there it was again, the draw threw up the same first contest. It was crazy. But I went into this and I was ready. And I walked onto that contest, and in my head, I was winning this contest. I had the strategy, I had the plan. And up until not many seconds towards the end, I was winning the contest. And as judo happens, flat on my back, game over, 21 seconds to go, and she won the contest. And I cannot remember feeling more devastated than I did after the Beijing Olympics. You walk out again. You go into the tunnel, an opposite tunnel, and I was just sitting on the floor in my hands crying. That was prior to going into the press, because it's the Olympic Games, so everybody wants to do press. And I just thought, what's it all about? It was probably like in my head, maybe, was it going to be my last Olympics? Was it not? I just sat there with my head in my hands and I was upset. I didn't know what to do. Failure. And do you know what? I walked back to the village, went back to the village. My teammates fought, and Adidas were a big sponsor within the village, and there was an Adidas, what would you call it? An Adidas story house. It was 3 or 4 stories high. You could walk through it. There was a huge sign, and it said, the real journey begins when you stand back up. And I was like, wow. And it was quite like, okay, Sarah, here we go again. You're a wee bit older, but are you going to go again? Or are you not? So we spent another week in the Olympic Village, talked about the ups and downs, debriefed, and I decided that I was going to go again. The reason being that I felt there was still more in the tank. I felt that I hadn't performed or won what I thought I could win, and that was the decision that I made, to drop down a category. 4 years at the lighter weight category, and I told British Judo, and they said, we won't fund you, we won't take you, we're not interested. We've got another player at 57 kilos that is up and coming. And I said, well, this is really about Sarah Clark now. I'm not really bothered. I'll fund myself. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I went on to the next Olympics, selected as number 1 at that weight category, because I just made it all about, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is for me. So yeah, failure, how do you handle it? It's horrible. It's not nice, but surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with the best people. They can pick you up. They can talk about it, debrief, and then look to the next steps, and use that failure as a catalyst to fuel. You don't want to feel like that again. You don't want to feel that bad. You don't want to be lying on the mat thinking game over. You want to win. Absolutely want to win. And then if you can put everything in to trying to win again, then I think then you are successful. There's no stone unturned, and you can be proud, you can be content, and you can get to the end of a career and go, well, do you know what? I actually gave it everything. And I don't think I could have given any more during my whole career.
Very inspiring. In the same light, you talk a lot about psychological training in addition to physical training. Tell me more about your win in 2006, where you became the European champion, beating Louis Ducos. What was that experience like, and what was it like to compete, knowing full well that odds are stacked against you and you have an active injury?
So I think going into 2006, as we said, I was injured. I'd hurt my knee. I tweaked the ligaments, and a lot of my training up till 2006 was in and around the injury. I was less on the mat doing what we call randori, which is sparring, and it was much more technical based. It was more condition based. Grip, you need to be able to grip hard in a judo contest, so we did a lot of hanging from the bars, hanging from gis, but it was really focused going into the training, and I literally went into that competition with minimal expectation on myself. Probably in my head there was less expectation from British Judo, from the wider judo community, and I went in with a sense of calmness, and every contest throughout the day got better and better. On that day I beat Scappen from Italian, she was an Olympic medalist. I beat Elizabeth Willebus from the Netherlands, she was Olympic medalist. And then I had Lucy Ducos, arguably the best middleweight of our time, in the final. And I just felt calm. It wasn't an easy contest. It didn't go bang, ippon, win, knockout. It was a 5-minute contest, but I just stuck to the strategy. I felt confident in my own ability and my own fitness and conditioning. And you know, it allowed me to realize that it doesn't have to be everything all of the time. Bang, bang, bang. You can deviate and focus. I had a big history behind me of training, of consistency, of always turning up. And it was really there. I just had to sort of put the icing on the cake. And it was a great feeling. It was relief. I remember walking off the mat and it was like, phew, that's it. Well done. And then, yeah, we talked about it, the good, the bad, and the what could I do better. And that was crazy. But yeah, it was really good. Good feeling.
Talking about things that can go better. Tell me more about your bout with Ronda Rousey.
Oh, yeah, that could go better. In 2004, I went to the Paris tournament, or the Tournoi de Paris, and I wasn't selected. British Judo said, yes, you can go along, you can compete, and you can self-fund, because I wasn't going to the Olympics in their eyes. And I took silver in Paris, and I actually fought Lucy Ducos in the final. And it was a really close final right until the end. And the Paris crowd were going crazy for Lucy. But it was a really great feeling, and it motivated me, because you go into this zone, most people didn't believe that I could get to the final of Paris. Billy believed that I could get there. And close match. I took silver. But that was the first of 3 tournaments that year that allowed me to qualify for the Olympic Games in 2004 in Athens. I fought Claudia Heil and then I fought Ronda Rousey in the repechage. And Ronda did beat me on that occasion. She pinned me. And I could do groundwork. She could do groundwork, so she didn't arm lock me, she didn't strangle me, but managed to turn and she managed to pin me. And I was very frustrated. But yeah, Ronda went on. She's done amazing things. She was a young lady at that Olympics. She was really springboard into the judo world, maybe 16 or 17 years old. And she went on to have an amazing career, didn't she, through judo, but then really through UFC and making films. She's an interesting character.
Absolutely. Sports is a great leveler in the sense that, you competing with people with the same level of training and the same level of strength, and more importantly, the same level of attitude and aptitude. So you don't know actually where life will take you, but at the same time, you are competing with the best of the best. Tell me more about your experience competing with the best of the time. And I would also love to learn more about your experience of funding yourself when your own backers, the governing body, let's say you said that you were not ready or couldn't qualify for Olympics. How do you keep going?
So that was a tough time. So that was the back end of 2003, 2004. And at that time, I wasn't funded by UK Sport. So in the UK, quite recently, lottery funding for athletes had come into play in 2002. So we went to 2004 and I wasn't maybe 1 or 2 in Great Britain at the time, maybe even lower in the governing body's eyes. Billy had said, look, Sarah can compete at this level, been around in a few tournaments. And at that time, they didn't have the belief. So we self-funded to Paris that year. And then from then on, I received some funding from British Judo that year. But again, the funding, the support was excellent once you got the support, but the build-up is really difficult. You have to almost prove yourself beyond proving yourself to get there. And for some people, that's really challenging. I was really lucky that we could do that for those few tournaments. Yeah. When you're fighting a battle that's not just the battle on the mat against one other person, when you're fighting an external battle as well. I was also lucky in that I often didn't fight that battle myself. I had battles that Billy could fight to get through, so I could take a step back and focus on training and competing. And then he would fight the other battles, whatever that would look like.
Were you ever frustrated? Did you ever thought of giving up?
100% honest, I didn't think of giving up. Again, going back to having the right people around you, I didn't think about giving up, but there was a lot of times I was injured and I would get an injury and I would think, why? Like, why is this happening again? Why is it so many weeks out from a big event? Why? Just why? And probably still can't answer that question. So I never ever thought about giving up. I was lucky that I could reassess, talk through it, and okay, what's the next goal? What's the next step? But it was tough. And again, later on in my career, when I wanted to drop down a category and I really thought I could win even more at that category, they said, no, we're not gonna take you, we're not gonna support you. I said, well, I'm gonna do that anyway. And I was lucky that I could, and then I got support after that. So you don't need to be fighting another battle as well as that one on the mat or in training, because your head plays tricks on you enough, doesn't it? Your head tries to bring you down, and you've got to have a bit that voice and that talk, that self-talk inside to lift you up. And I guess that's where my psychologist helped a lot as well.
You've had a phenomenal career. You have 10 British and Scottish titles in your name and a career spanning 18 years. What kept you going especially around incentives and more importantly, the goal being fuzzy? How do you keep yourself motivated and keep going? 18 years is not a small time. If we factor life in as well, there are so many things, you have to make sure that you are making a decent living, supporting the people around you, because it's a very consuming sport. It's not like a job. It's like twice the job because you are 200% invested and you forget everything around you to focus on one and only one thing. How did you keep going?
I feel lucky that I'm not an athlete right now because there is so many things to distract you. There is so many more, in my opinion, expectations or cameras or footage, or you're being watched 24/7. I think if you can take your head away from the noise and just get on with it. You can move forward. For me, the motivation was whenever I came off a competition that didn't go so well, or even one that did, to be honest, I always thought there was more. I thought I had more to give. I thought that wasn't the best Sarah Clark out there because last week in training it looked like this, or on the training camp in Russia it looked like this. So I always thought there was more to give, and I don't know what I genuinely can't pinpoint what motivated me to keep going, because was it my grounding from my parents? Was it the support from Billy? Was it the judo club support? Was it the family and friends? Was it the governing bodies? Or was it just this something inbuilt that said you can do more, you can do better? I was always trying to push the boundary, because I learned throughout my career how to manipulate my body and my mind, whether through nutrition or sleep or rest and recovery or working with a psychologist. I learned that there were so many things you can manipulate and play about with. There was always something else that I could do to try and be better. It's just a shame that I wasn't a machine, because if I was a machine, you could input, output, but it wasn't quite like that. Yeah, and I just like to train. I actually really enjoyed the process of training. I really enjoyed that you go from point A to point B, and if you put the work in, you can often see the results, and that result isn't necessarily the gold medal or the bronze medal or the silver medal. The result was what would happen over time. You could see how you got better or how it developed. So what kept me going, I think, just a bit crazy. I think you've got to be a bit crazy to do sport, or you've got to be a bit crazy to do it for that long, for very little financial reward. Ultimately, is the finance. Finance is important, very important. You need that to live, but it doesn't mean that much, does it?
Tell me more about the support system. You mentioned you had like tremendous support from in every stage of your life. Early on with your parents taking you wherever you wanted to fulfill your passion. And then later in your life, you're having built the support ability. Did you create a support structure around yourself, or you fell into it? Tell me more about how you created that around you.
I think that it's self-created in that I felt I was doing the right thing. This is what you need to do to go to the next level. And then I think if you are committed and determined and all the things you spoke about, you turn up all the time, on time, I think then the people supported me with that. They could see that I wanted to push and do better. And I felt that I got a lot of support from some really good people around that. I think the support falls apart when you maybe promise or somebody says they're going to do something and then they don't commit 100%. I think you need to be all in. And the people that I work with that supported me, if they were all in with me, then I was all in with them. So I think you create that. Billy had a group of people that wanted to push and grow and develop. He ran a full-time setup in Scotland well before it was really common to run a full-time setup. There was maybe other pockets years before in the Midlands, and then at the same time as us in London. But never before had it been done in Scotland. So he really created a group of people that wanted to push the limits, and he helped push the limits of sport and judo. So from there, we created a big group of people and a good group of support and network. And then it changes. We go through 18 years to be a full-time athlete is a long time. You go through a lot of transitions of national governing bodies, national coaches, different setups, centralised training, decentralised trainings, and consistency with what I did was probably the most important thing, the people that I did it with.
I think consistency is key in any domain. Tell me more about being all in, and all in the sense that you believe yourself. More importantly, you believe in your ability to sustain prolonged periods of uncertainty, ambiguity, and doubt from the outside world. So the reason I'm asking is we live in a world where we talk a lot about hedging our risk, not putting all our eggs in one basket. Whereas the world of professional sport is putting all your eggs in one single basket and making sure that that basket remains full for a very long time. So tell me more about, all-in mentality.
That is a tough one. Sometimes I didn't even think that. Sometimes it was just quite robotic that I would do it. And if I knew that if I knew that something was going to make me better, I would do it. But at the same time, if I felt and believed something wasn't going to make me better, I would question why, what, how, what's going on. But I think in the world of sport, certainly from my point of view, and there'll be a lot of people that absolutely disagree with this. And until we get a system in Great Britain or in Scotland or in England that can run education or work and being a full-time athlete, it's really difficult it's really difficult to do. I believe that to be a full-time athlete for a judo player, that you have to be all in, and it's really difficult to do other things because the amount of training that you need to do to compete with the best in the world, whether it's the Japanese, whether it's the Koreans, the French, the Brazilians, you need to go all in. And I was of the mindset that if it didn't work out in judo, I could always go back to education and I can always rebuild and look at work and development. And I was a very curious person anyway, so I was always reading, I was always learning and always developing. But for me to give it my absolute best in judo, I had to be all in no matter what. And again, that goes back to the support network that I had around me, especially coming from my parents, that they allowed me to do that and they allowed me to move forward with that. It's really hard to study or to work when you're training 2 or 3 times a day and you need to eat really well, you need to sleep, you need to prepare food, you often have to travel an hour to training. It wasn't that we lived all in one place and training was there because the finance wasn't there to support that. If we've got the finance to house and develop and grow, maybe you can learn and develop on site. But at this moment in time, arguably, we haven't got that. Some people may argue that we have that, but I'm not so sure.
Is that the same advice you give to kids who train in Edinburgh Judo?
Right now, I probably don't give the same advice. It's much more an open conversation because we probably live in a different world now. And I guess that so for me, young people have a lot of options now and young people can jump around and do many more things. For me, we talk about like keeping your options open, maybe looking at some sort of education while you're training until that person decides that they want to buy in and that they're committed to doing this 100%. And also if they've got the financials behind them as well. If you haven't got the financial backing behind you, it's really difficult to do it. So is that the same advice now? Maybe not, but I think we're in a different world. Would it be if I believed there was an amazing system that could take the young person through to elite level with some sort of educational training or development, then yes, I would say that, but I don't believe that system's there right now in the UK.
How do you invest in education outside of the mat or outside of the gym? Like you said, it's really important to have a well-roundedness, and training is not just about pure skill development, but you have to make sure that you are instilling the right mindset for them to be able to explore other avenues, and then they are able to apply the same level of skill and the same level of rigor and the effort to do well in whichever field they pursue.
I think currently we talk about having something else other than judo purely because of the system or the lack of system. Edinburgh Judo isn't at the point where we can look after the athlete financially from maybe leaving school to going to the Olympic Games. You need the governing body, you need the area, you need a lot of money and a lot to go into that one person. So until somebody commits to maybe moving away to a national programme, which is maybe slightly centralised, rightly or wrongly, whatever you believe about that programme, we can only advise this is the training and this is the education opportunities. So at this moment in time, we haven't got a full-time system within Edinburgh Judo to manage the whole package. But what we do is we try to develop the person as a whole, and we are much more conscious that it's more likely than not that the young person will not be an elite Olympic athlete. It's much more likely that they're going to go out into the world of work and use sport maybe as part of their life. So we try to keep the skills aligned with that. So it's a really difficult balance because some kids at 16 have told their parents they absolutely just want to do judo, and the parents are like, wow, what do we do? So we're almost in the middle trying to manage that. Okay, what are the options? Where do you want to do? How committed are you? And also ultimately you're looking at, has that kid got what it takes? There's a lot of young people that maybe don't quite have the skills, but you're looking at the mentality. Have they got the mentality to stay the course? Will they turn up on time? Do they put everything into it? Are they willing to sort of sacrifice other things to move forward? So yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have. Really difficult conversation.
I fully understand it's difficult, but at the same time, with the right level of support, and Billy and you are doing a phenomenal job in making sure that young people have the right level of stewardship and mentorship. So all the best, and I'm sure you're doing some phenomenal work. Tell me more about the up and coming talent. So how important is for you to be able to spot the talent and giving them right advice and opportunity once you spot them?
Yeah, really interesting. We have a real pipeline of coaches. So often, a child will come in at 3-year-old, and as we talked about before, judo is just lots of fun and development, and it's a very family oriented as well. Billy's family work within the judo club. His son's now just turned 30, and he is going to the Commonwealth, or everything going well, he's going to the Commonwealth Games this year. But Scott is also one of the young coaches, or youngish coaches, within the pipeline of Edinburgh Judo. We have a program whereby young people have access to what we call our performance training program. So it's a couple of extra hours a week where skills are honed, and it's if children have shown a desire to do more training, or if they've shown an aptitude to developing in the judo. So we put them along this program.
Tell me more about the work that you're doing in training the next generation of coaches who are going to be mentoring these young people.
Ultimately, when you run the judo club and having stepped back from competition, you see a much wider and a much more holistic, community-based approach to delivering judo initially. I think what we're trying to look at now when we're developing a framework of what does Edinburgh Judo do, what does it look like, and what's it offering, what avenues is it offering to different people. So often we start at sort of 3-4-year-old is when we capture some young people in the judo club, which is crazy to think that now we've got coaches in our pipeline that are coaching the next generation that started in our judo club as 3 and 4-year-olds that we coached. And then now we've mentored, they've been within the environment that we feel is really good to develop and grow. And they're now mentoring and coaching the next generation. So these young people have really been in a system that we think is probably the best system, the best environment, and also the culture and behaviours of how we want Edinburgh Judo to grow and develop. So we have classes from 3-year-old up to 18-year-old, and initially you're trying to develop a foundation of just behaviours in young people as well as physical. You're trying to develop this foundation of how do you listen? How do you work with other people? How do you work as part of a team in a group on the mat? Can you listen? All these skills that you're trying to develop. And we do that through the schools, the club, and then we open sessions to different clubs and different people. So they have to meet and work with different people. And then we have classes available for young people to just continue within the club if they want to continue on their grading towards their black belt. But also we have performance sessions from 8 years old, which sounds really crazy because it isn't. Right now you're in performance. We actually stress that this isn't about performance, competition performance. This is about performance behaviours. Okay, are you turning up on time? Have you arrived with your water bottle and your belt? Okay, what did you learn from that session? What did your friend do that was really positive? We get the kids to feedback. So we're setting these behaviours really young, and a sense of responsibility. And then as the coaches are developing, so the coaches are working with these young people, they'll then feed back to the young volunteers that are on the sessions. So then they're already starting their judo journey and their coaching journey as a young coach. And we've got Karen, who's our youngest coach through to 16-year-old, and she's been coaching for 25 plus years, and that's Billy's sister, and she is phenomenal. And the parents, you want to hear what the parents say about Karen, is like, wow, she can come to our school, she can come to my house. How can Karen control and look after 30 children when I can't even look after one child? So it's really interesting, the feedback we get. But the coaches are on a journey, a CPD. They are going to see how's judo taught in different countries. How do we teach it in different areas? How do you work with different types of children? Maybe those that have come from a bit more challenging backgrounds, that are a bit loud or a bit boisterous. Or how do we bring out those youngest, the most nervous children? How do we bring them out of the shell and get them to sort of grow and develop? And then, it's a whole cycle and a whole circle, because often the coaches that have been performers are now becoming the coaches. So we've got Sarah Adlington, who will aim to win her 3rd Commonwealth Games gold medal in Glasgow this year. And Sarah's instrumental in coaching, as well as Billy's son, Scott, and some of the younger coaches, Nick and Craig. Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's a really interesting journey. And for me, sometimes I'm doing less coaching, but it's much more focused on, okay, what does somebody need? What does an individual need rather than what does a whole class need?
Comparing that to your training, obviously many things have changed, and you touched upon a very important nerve that behavior design is more important than skill design. How do you empower young kids to design good habits, which then cascade not only on the judo mat, but also outside the classroom? So, how do you make sure that kids are developing skills which are truly cross-sectional, they're not just limited to sport?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it comes down to accountability. So we also understand that these young people from the youngest age to maybe 15 or 16 are coming to the judo club with their parents or their families. So some of these things, some things are out with our control and out with their controls in terms of timekeeping, or parents are juggling other things, as well as things, nutrition. I have a big focus on nutrition, and we talk a lot about nutrition with people. Are they fueled? Are you fueled well? But we also try and talk to the families about nutrition, because a child ultimately is only eating what their parents or guardians are giving them. So we try and educate the parents as well. And we'll talk about, did you have a snack today? What did the snack look like? Well, have you tried this? Did you have it in your bag? Have you got a bag with you? Why have you not got a bag? Why did you leave your belt? How can you then get them buddied up to make them accountable to each other? So I think these skills are really important. Timekeeping skills, as then they speak to their parents about why they don't want to be late, not because it makes the coach angry, but because I want to get the most out of the class, or because I want to feel like I'm being on time. So I think these are really tiny things. You're ultimately at it's difficult to put all these things in when the parent is still bringing the child. But once they turn 17, 18, and they are making their own way to training, then you can get a one-to-one, say, hang on a minute, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go in life? How do you want it to look? Okay, look at these things. These are the skills. And we'll have some real deep conversations like that.
And is that having the deep psychological conversation, is that part of the ways or the methods of working that you instill in all your coaches and your instructors and your pupil as well?
Absolutely. But I think you've also got to be careful there as well, because we're a collective group of coaches that have different ideas, and maybe in a one-to-one, it might come across different from me, different when it comes from me than it does from Scott, or that does from Sarah or Craig. So I think we have some general guidelines about how we would talk to young people, and then in a group we would come together and then talk about it in the open. So how does this work for you? How would it work collectively? What does good look like? What does bad look like? And what does better look like? How do you do this when you're leaving home, or when you've left home? How do you do this when you're out at university all day and you need to get to training? So I think we try and upskill the coaches, and we are certainly going through a process where I feel we need the coaches to develop much more in this way. So we maybe need to bring external people in, such as working with psychologists, working with maybe the education teachers, early years, so that we have the Edinburgh Judo way, but it's informed by external data.
I'm sure with leaders like yourself, Billy, Sarah, and all the others involved with Edinburgh Judo, the young generation is in best pair of hands.
I hope.
With that, I would like to thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon, Sarah. I know you've been exceptionally busy, so really, really appreciate you sparing some of your valuable time for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to sit and chat and talk through some of my ideas and feelings, and the background to what made me who I am today.